Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios is still on the schedule for February 21st, although the new year is here. And we haven't seen any motion for really getting this thing in gear, getting it promoted or press conference, anything like that. But that's another discussion for another day. Let's assume we're still all go. WBC welterweight title on the line here in Las Vegas at T-Mobile. And let's get into it, man. When we're talking, I'm wondering, everyone's wondering now. We were going to talk about this weeks ago, but now I think everybody is echoing the sentiment. Is Ryan Garcia really focused for this fight at hand, which is a chance for him to become a world champion for the first time in his career? I know Barrios is coming off of an unimpressive performance where he had to rally a little bit to even hold on to his title via draw with a 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao. But I'm going to start by saying you're getting a different Mario Barrios, at least psychologically, heading into this fight with Ryan Garcia. Mario Barrios, from my time talking to him, he has some contempt for Ryan Garcia. And to get deep, but to get my Larry Merchant on, I think Barrios, on some level, thinks of this fight as the Aztec, him, the native, against the conquistador. And for people who don't know, the conquistadors were, of Spanish descent who took over the natives of then Mexico. Well, whatever Mexico was called back then, I'm not that smart, but they eventually conquered them. And Barrios, as you know, is not one of these Mexican descent fighters that does the Viva Mexico cabrones and all that kind of stuff. He's more into his Mayan, Aztec roots. And he once told me a quote that we're completely different people, him and Ryan Garcia. I think on some level, he looks at Ryan Garcia as the Americanized Mexican. There was some of this at play when Julio Cesar Chavez would fight Oscar De La Hoya, or even Fernando Vargas fighting Oscar De La Hoya, and Julio Cesar Chavez walked Fernando Vargas out. But this is a little different here. This isn't the Viva Mexico Cabron Mexican against the Mexican American. This is a kid who, again, is into his Aztec roots and all that stuff. So I think he looks at them as opposites in that regard. He looks at Ryan Garcia as Hollywood, and Ryan Garcia is the Southern California Mexican fighter who hangs out in Hollywood a lot, is hanging out with a lot of streamers and YouTubers and influencers. And meanwhile, he is the Tex-Mex. He's from Texas and just a different kind of cat altogether than most fighters you'll deal with. And so while Ryan Garcia is in his living room, hanging out with some of these influencers I'm not that familiar with. They come across the timeline, Aiden Ross or Neon or Chris Rock or India Love and all this. And we haven't seen him in the gym. Meanwhile, Mario Barrios has been in the gym for months with his new trainer, Joe Gusen. And we'll get to that angle later on in the discussion. And then Mario Barrios, who never really was that confident. He had too much respect for Manny Pacquiao heading into that fight. This time, he's doing early proclamations back in November about, man, I can't believe me and Devin Haney knew each other and came up, and now we're going to be the biggest fight in the welterweight division, a unification. That's an early proclamation of victory. That's a level of confidence and bravado Barrios is heading into this fight against Ryan Garcia. And to close my opening monologue about this, look, there's a famous phrase we all know. Ryan Garcia is the more explosive, naturally gifted fighter than Mario Barrios. But hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Do you think Ryan Garcia, it's hard to tell from where we're sitting watching videos, but what do you think, Raheem?
I love the narrative, the Aztec, I like cultural wars. I'm not sure this will rise to that occasion because it's not this era anymore. Like, you and I remember that and how well you could stoke a fight simply with a cultural divide, even between two Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I don't know that sentiment runs so deep. Oscar and what he faced with Mexicans that lived in Mexico and Mexican Americans who felt that he was too Americanized, that dynamic really doesn't run the same kind of sentiment that it once did. I don't believe that Ryan Garcia really is viewed as, and what do they call him? I don't even want to use the term, but they call certain black people white on the inside coconuts, or bananas if you're Asian and white on the inside, all these kind of things. I forget what it is for Mexicans, but whatever it is, I don't think that Ryan Garcia really is carrying that albatross around his neck. In addition to that, with all due respect, Barrios is not Vargas, damn sure ain't Chavez, and he maybe hasn't fought to his talent, and this is the fight that rises his level. I'm fully willing to accept that that's a possibility, but of course, what we saw out against Pacquiao won't get it done. And I would agree with you that I haven't seen anything from Ryan that suggests he's in the gym, training hard, focused. Maybe he's just not putting those videos out.
Right.
He could be doing it. However, he might be a guy that would benefit from not being tight like that because that's what we saw against Romero. And Romero was the loose guy that really, or at least was presenting like he wasn't really dialed in, intense about it. He was making jokes, having his kind of melodramatic delivery to answering questions. He really wasn't engaging the press like hype or I'm going to beat your ass or any of that. He was playing it cool. Ryan, I think, fights better when he's loose. I think maybe we hope, of course, that he's clean, and we have to say hope because he's been popped. But if he's clean, and that isn't the reason why he lost the Romero fight, then it could simply be that whole week he was tight at the press conferences, in the interviews. He was on his. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with religion or anything like that. It's just that the presenting Garcia, who has the religious, vibe, and he's subdued and so supposedly focused, really just comes off as tight and wasn't able to do his best work in there because he was, I don't believe, relaxed. And yes, a fighter who works hard beats a fighter with talent, but you know what else is an adage in boxing? The most relaxed fighter also beats a fighter that is feeling the pressure or is in too tense. Ryan Garcia goes in there relaxed, having fun. His speed absolutely trumps Barrios. If Barrios has knockout power, he should have been able to knock out an old Pacquiao or at least knock him down or do something to hurt him. I don't see Ryan Garcia falling to Barrios if he's loose and having fun in there. He should probably make it a fun fight. Barrios will, in fact, come forward and do what he can, but the speed, I believe, the experience Ryan Garcia has, and if he's having fun and playing it loose, it's going to be a fun fight to watch, and he'll probably win that thing going away and even stop Barrios.
Well, I think you're going to get a less tight Barrios too because he had the pressure on. He doesn't deal well with pressure. Heading his first time under the bright lights with Tank, he was incredibly tight. And then he was loosened up in a losing effort against Keith Thurman and then went on a good run, beating guys like Ugas, to acquire a world title. I think this fight, he's the underdog again. There was a lot of pressure on Barrios. He did not like the media attention heading into Pacquiao. The pressure was, you better beat this old man's ass. You better retire him. He's 46 years old. And to Barrios's credit, Pacquiao showed up better than I thought he would for that fight. He still had his push-pull game, his in and out, his trickiness, his awkwardness, and he still had the power in his left hand. And I know we wanted more from Barrios. I certainly did in that fight. But he kind of did the best he could because Pacquiao was still more talented than him, even at 46 years old. And if he got out of line and got overzealous against Pacquiao, he might have got knocked out at some point in that fight. So he had to wait until 10, 11, 12 for the old man to finally slow down a little bit, and then he rallied enough to hold on to his title.
Yeah, but Sean, all of those things to me are making the case for Garcia. Literally every single one of those elements. Garcia's not 46. Garcia has power too.
Yep.
Speed and timing make power. Again, if he's playing it loose, and I don't mean loose as he isn't training or he isn't focused at all, but I'm saying he's not putting extra pressure on himself and creating this personality that's a little subdued, if you will. And also he's getting out of the De La Hoya deal. He's, I think, having fun on social media, getting back to his personality. I don't see anything that Barrios brings to the table with a Pete Garcia. Yes, the Garcia that has been knocked out by Tank and the Garcia that got knocked down by Rolly. Same guy, but at his peak, I don't see Barrios bringing anything to the table that's really going to give him serious problems. And later in the fight, you're not going to get a 46-year-old Pacquiao slowing down if there is a later in the fight. I think Ryan could box circles around him. Now, if he's not on his game, if he is really just not focused and doing social media and not training and such, you might have a problem on your hands. Sure, that can happen to any fighter. But also, I think the whole Gusen element of it is really motivating Garcia, and he's not showing us his hand in the gym. He probably is holding that back intentionally. Gusen does play a role in this for sure, but can he bring Barrios to the levels? Even if you know what to do against Ryan, if Ryan's functioning on all cylinders and fighting his best fight, even if you know what to do, can you make Barrios do it?
Well, yeah, and just to get back to a few points before I get to Goosen, I don't think part of my argument, and I know you weren't thinking that was my argument. It's funny, even Morales and Barrera, to your point, both from Mexico, had a cultural rivalry. Morales from Tijuana, the poor section, and Barrera was Chilango, is someone they call from the city, from Mexico City, a little bit higher class status than the Tijuana guy and all that. So yeah, this is nothing new what we're talking about. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think Garcia's looked at as whitewashed or something like that. But what it is he's Hollywoodified. That's what I think someone like Barrios would look at him like. You've gotten away from Victorville as quick as you can to live up in the to hang out in the Hollywood Hills and frequent Los Angeles all the time. And I'm San Antonio to the bone. I'm still where I come from proudly, and that kind of thing. And you're right. What Garcia is doing is summoning up that chaotic, confident energy that he did from the Devin Haney fight. And Haney has said, "Oh, he's back on that shit again." Well, and I understand why Devin would say that because he's showing those signs. I mean, his voice was even different and lighter for the Romero fight. It sounded more like the kid who fought Javier Fortuna and Emmanuel Tago and Luke Campbell. And now he's sounding more like the guy that fought Devin Haney again and temperament and everything. But Barrios is a snack fighter like Haney was, and that raised Ryan Garcia's eyebrows. That raised Sonny Edwards' eyebrows against Bam Rodriguez. That raised his fighter like Jamal Charlo's eyebrows. So just to keep it objective on both sides about that. Now, as for Joe Gusen, I remember I had a live on my Fight Hype days where I pointed out, and I even had a picture. I said, guess who I saw after the weigh-in the MGM Grand Media Room, chumming it up, having an inner circle conversation with Louis DeCubas Jr., Leonard Ellerbe, and Joe Gusen. And it was Joe Gusen the night before the fight. And it was obvious to me that Ryan had been plotted upon, but it was a willing participant because of the kind of money he was going to make for the Gervonta Davis fight. And when you mentioned he was knocked out in the Davis fight, he surely was by a better fighter on that night, no doubt about it. But he was also weight drained of his own doing because he wanted that money. He didn't, and that pissed Oscar De La Hoya off. Oscar's like, hey, we got to stay the course here, become a world champion, and then maybe at some point get Tank to come up to 40 because you're an even or approaching an even economic. You got to build up more leverage instead of just bypass title fights, never fight for a title, and get right into the big money that you're anxious to get into. And he got his big money at the cost of getting knocked out by a body shot. But point being, Ryan was kind of, by his advisor, Lupe Valencia, he kind of bypassed the Golden Boy protocol and got the big money. But Joe Gusen, when I saw him in camp, it was easy to connect the dots. PBC has TGB, Tom Gusen Brown. I'm getting it wrong, but it's Tom Brown and the Gusen family merged together as the promoter of the fight. Joe Gusen is Joe Gusen in that TGB equation. And ultimately, his alliances may have aligned. He was a broadcaster, a commentator for PBC at the time. So it's not easy to point out who may have been the mole in Joe Gusen. And of course, and I don't think it's a good look that the opposing fighter's trainer is chumming it up with the other fighter's entire camp the night before the fight. So Garcia, I'm sure, will use that as motivation. But I think Barrios has a trainer upgrade in his corner. I got a lot of love for Bob Santos personally, but I'm not sold. I'm sorry, Bob, if you're watching, but I'm not sold on Bob at the championship level as a trainer. I know Bob learned under guys like Emmanuel, guys like Freddie Roach in California and others. I'm not sold. Joe Gusen is much more proven, even if he's not the trainer he was when he told Diego Corrales 21 years ago, you better fucking get inside on him after he got up from the knockdowns against Jose Luis Castillo. He probably has lost some miles off his own fastball, but I still think it's probably an upgrade over Bob Santos. And he has the knowledge of Ryan Garcia. I think Mark Ortega, who he mentioned on Twitter that Joe Gusen has precedence for this. He trained Diego Corrales to beat Joel Casamayor, who was once trained by Joe. So he has this precedent for beating a former fighter working the corner. And Barrios isn't the puncher. He has solid power, though, Raheem, in both hands. Solid power, respectable power. You could argue definitely better power on the night at 147 than Haney had at 140 fighting a Garcia who blew weight. And he may not be the twitchy athlete that Romero is. He may not be the puncher Romero is. But Barrios has a solid technical base. He's a solid technical all-around fighter. It's just there's nothing superlative about him. But he's very solid across the board. And he may have seen from Romero, if you take away that left hook, which is the same thing Davis said, if you take away that left hook, he's very ordinary. That is his one superlative gift. It's the hand speed and everything and the power, but really when it only comes to one punch. And Barrios is disciplined enough to watch the Romero tape, armed with Joe Gusen, to maybe win this fight by an upset. I'm definitely thinks he has a real chance of winning this fight.
Is of course a winnable fighter. He is the champion. I understand that and I'm not saying he isn't a skilled and talented fighter with advantages. However, I don't see any of his advantages, even the ones that you mentioned, besting what Ryan can bring to the table
Yeah.
when Ryan's at his best. I think the speed actually is going to be the killer. I think maybe if he neutralizes the left hook, this fight goes longer and requires Ryan to pull something out of the hat, but it's in the hat. Gusen and being the mole and the way you describe it, which I hope isn't true. I know Ryan believes it. That's some circumstantial evidence you're putting forward. But boy, that would be some dirty pool, boy. That's a dirty, backstabbing, conniving, low down, yellow belly job to do on your own fighter, especially in a fight that big, but on any fight on any level at any time. You can't trade your guy, for your that would be a wild thing if it's actually true, and you can't really rule anything out when it comes to money and business and positioning. But I hope it's not true. And if it is, then it would be difficult for any fighter to trust this guy. It would be such a stain on you. No matter what you can produce, I wouldn't have a fella like that in my corner at all. And we see fighters blame their trainers in the past, with conspiratorial stories and what they built up in their head, why it's not their fault, it's the trainer's fault. It's why fighters train with different guys after they lose. I get it, but that's just it's such an indictment, and with some circumstantial evidence. I would hate to learn that about Goose, and I really hope it isn't true, but it might be fuel enough for Ryan to know that he has to beat Gusen and Barrios to not fuck around. He doesn't want to find out. And so that in and of itself might be not only the reason we're not seeing him training, because he doesn't want to give Gusen no clues as to what he's changing or give him any extra intelligence on how to game plan for him. And also, he might be playing a little mind game with hey, I'm not paying attention. I'm not focused. I'm just, out here on my old shit, and then coming there well-oiled and ready to rock. I don't think him being in this mindset is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think Ryan Garcia is coming in there to fuck it off. I don't think he's in there to lose. I believe he wants to beat Gusen maybe more than Barrios. He wants that world title so you can stop criticizing him about not ever having one. He
Mhm.
wants to be a Mexican American like De La Hoya, even though they've got their beefs. I think if he were honest about it, De La Hoya's got to be the pinnacle of what he can see himself as being. And the friction there and the contract being up, he needs to make a statement. He's not dumb. He knows that. He's getting his social media together, I think maybe, so that he can have that much more impact when he gets this world title and social media is already on the roll to coordinate him, the next Mexican great. We see Canelo decline. We don't know what's going to happen next with that, but there's a shoe for Ryan Garcia to step into, and he's had a lot of beefs, Mexican meat, if you will, to uh, eclipse with this win. The Canelo beef, the De La Hoya beef, his Mexican beef ain't with Barrios. It's with his former best friends and promoters.
Mhm. All great points, Raheem. Seriously. Yeah, in the art of war, deception, right? To appear distracted, but really you're coming with everything. Pause. I get, they got me, Raheem. They got me saying pause sometimes, but you
Oh,
get and
none of us can stop every now and then. I got you. It's a good one though.
yeah. No, there's that and I agree with you that the speed could very well overwhelm Barrios. Pacquiao's speed at 46 overwhelmed him in a lot of spots. Although Garcia doesn't have that in and out foot speed and awkwardness that Pacquiao has, but and then Garcia just by unloading the clip with his speed against Haney got the left hook off. So it's not like he has to have this great right hand or this great jab. It's just he had in spurts by letting all that speed go at once, the hook finds a home, and that's all he has to do really. And so yeah, I think you make a lot of great points. It is interesting what's going on, not just with his contract being up with Oscar, but with Golden Boy, maybe having their contract up with DAZN early in the year, and this being a fight probably, will be on Amazon Prime if it does go off. I know DAZN will want their piece of the pay-per-view pie out of that too, but that's something else to watch. Also, to the point of Garcia's focus, I haven't seen him on when we were originally going to record this. One thing I was going to mention was Barrios is in the gym while not only is Garcia in his living room, but Garcia's on inside the ring with Max and those guys every week, which also you got to worry about the multitasking focus. I don't think he's been on there for a few episodes now. I think Malik Scott has taken his place on that panel as of late. So that's a sign that he is hunkering down for his 8-week camp, the real stretch of preparation. I'm with you. Garcia is the favorite. He's just has a level of talent and amateur pedigree too over Barrios that Barrios doesn't possess. But what I've always liked about this fight is Barrios has things Garcia does not. A world title, some wins over legit world caliber guys like a Yordenis Ugas, but Garcia has what he doesn't have, and that's stardom and the being looked upon as a real dangerous threat against the best fighters in the world. And then also, destiny, man. It may just be written in the stars that him and Devin Haney have to have a rematch for cosmic stakes. I know I said this on other videos we've done, but there's also that, man. It's like it does feel like we do got to get Ryan and Devin part two, and this time it would be a unification at welterweight. This time with Canelo on the decline, Crawford having retired, Tank Davis nowhere in sight, at least in the United States. Ryan and Devin too becomes the biggest fight in boxing potentially. So maybe little old Mario Barrios can't stop that train from coming.
You talk about the art of war, and I talk about the motivations that are not necessarily tied directly to Barrios, but what winning this fight means. And you bring up the ring appearances. Well, yeah, Ryan knows how to play the game of fame. He's getting his social media together, got him in his living room. He's getting the girl fans tied back into his socials. And then you're appearing on ring. You're doing what Turkey wants, which is hyping his show. You're getting multiple appearances while you could definitely be in the gym training, but instead you're making that appearance to make the show hot because the show not hot. And so what do you see once you win a world title? You are now potentially the biggest Mexican star in boxing, and you're out of your deal with De La Hoya, who you not only have been beefing with, but want to, if you're honest, emulate one day. And you can now deal directly with Turkey because you're out of that deal. You fucking give the finger to Oscar. That's going to make it harder because he doesn't have Garcia to deal with Turkey in Riyadh season if he wants to. That's a huge loss from his stable. Ryan's now operating on his own. You know the massive fight is coming, so why can't he just negotiate himself into mass money? Because there's no question what Turkey ultimately wants. You want the rematch. And that rematch can happen, and you don't need necessarily a promoter now to negotiate the big bucks for you. You're a title holder. That's a unification bout. You're negotiating for yourself. So you're keeping more of the money, and you're giving the fucking finger to everybody and thumbing your nose at people who are calling you a cheat and all that shit. And who knows where that fight lands? That might be another Zuffa show. Who knows what they use that fight to do for Riyadh season? But if Ryan's on his own, holding a world title, having just kind of proven everybody wrong in some degree, not only is that mass motivation for him to win this fight, but it puts him in a hell of a great position to elevate to what his potential has always been. He can be that guy. And then you set the stage for the rematch with Devin Haney, which you have to admit, for Turkey's sake, not having that rematch immediately after Times Square because of the poor performances from each fighter. He could have still done it. That fight would have still sold. We'd still be talking about it. It might have been even more interesting because of the whole PED conversation and whether or not Ryan fell off. And now Devin Haney can definitely go in saying he's fighting a guy as a clean fighter now. And all those narratives would have been there. But Turkey's building this fight properly. If Ryan is successful against Barrios, and especially if he stops him, and now this table is set much better for a Riyadh season mass show than it would have been after the Times Square bout.
I don't know. His Times Square thing was a debacle, and his original plan failed. You know, he lost, and now this is going to be an American promoter show between Golden Boy and PBC. They're going to sell out T-Mobile if this fight happens or close to it. I can't give him all the credit for.
I'm just talking about I'm talking about the setup for the rematch with Devin and Ryan. Yeah, the Times Square show is a debacle, but if they had put the Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney rematch on immediately after, it would have still been a major fight. There are still narratives because of those performances that would have sold that fight. And if he was greedy in the moment and had no forethought about it, that fight, if he had it then, would have been big enough and we'd have been engaged in it. But I don't think it would have been as big as it will be if Ryan gets this world title against Barrios. That's all I'm saying.
No, certainly not. Not Devin beating the number one ranked welterweight in Norman and then Ryan beating. Yeah, it's way bigger now.
And you get Oscar out of the picture on top of that. And now Zuffa's in play. You don't like he's got a lot more option. The fight's bigger, and he doesn't have to deal with Oscar. That's a better situation for him to be in. And you can't, I mean, by him not going, especially after a debacle, by him not going for the low-hanging fruit, you got to give him credit for that. I'm not prepared to say he orchestrated, like he didn't fucking pull all these strings together and this was his master plan, but not going for the low-hanging fruit after a shit show does show that he has some savvy as to how he can build a fight better.
Any chance in hell Oscar can retain Ryan? Oscar even dissed him on Christmas with his 12 days of Christmas. It feels like that ship is definitely sailing.
Yeah, I mean, what? I mean, how? I mean, I get how Oscar can move past it because that's just good business, and this is a huge star potential to be even a bigger star, and you want to keep him in the stable. But like relationship wise, how are they going to pull that off? Why would Ryan do that? Even like why? Where is the motivation for Garcia to put the differences aside and everything that he hates about Oscar is going to be true the day after he resigns? So what's in it for him, especially like I say, with a massive fight right there on the horizon that doesn't need a promoter to make. He doesn't need a promoter to make that fight. He can
Right.
negotiate that for himself.
The only scenario I could think of, and it's far-fetched, and it's not the scenario I'd want to see. I'd prefer a unification in these scenarios we're laying out. Haney Garcia 2, WBC, WBO, unification 147. The only way is if PBC isn't fully doing business with Riyadh in the United States for fights they feel they could sell on their own still, like a Garcia Barrios. And Oscar can make a deal with PBC to make Tank 2, which would also be a big fight. It would come down to Ryan for some reason preferring to, but even then, Ryan could just do business with PBC if he felt like for that fight and cut Oscar out. So I don't know. Winning makes everything better. They got along for a little bit before the Haney fight got overturned, but I don't see it. It doesn't look likely, but I guess that's the only small possible scenario I could see them staying together is, hey, actually, instead of Haney 2, let's do Tank Davis 2 in the States and do another Golden Boy PBC show. But I don't see that happening.
Which fight would you rather see?
The Haney fight. But
Tank. I'm of course we cover it, but I'm when you said it, I like nothing.
no one's asking for that. Yeah.
Nothing came across my mind or heart. I didn't get no goosebumps. I didn't be my that is just like ugh. I don't even want that fight right now. I want, if anything, Tank Roach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way more than I want to see Ryan in there again.
Yep.
You know, Ryan has played his cards well if in fact he is playing a good hand right now and gonna go in there and be explosive, be the best Ryan that we've seen. He will be sitting in the catbird seat in just a couple of months. Not even a couple of months.
Like 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man. Barrios, I think, has a tall order ahead of him. But I tell you what, if he does win this fight, with all the things that are on the table and on the horizon for Ryan, if Barrios beats Ryan, Ryan might be finished as like a top contender. He might have to go back to that social media, go back to that ring table, and just become like a social media darling. Stop really challenging himself at the top levels, and run his money that way. Because if he doesn't win this fight after losing to Rolly, after the scandal with Haney, are we even taking the guy serious anymore? I think that's a no.